What is the medical disability exception to the citizenship test for English and civics? I'm Erick Widman. I'm an immigration lawyer, and the U.S. Congress has recognized that there are many worthy applicants for U.S. citizenship. They want to naturalize, but because of a medical disability, they're unable to take and pass the required tests. The standard tests are an English test for reading and writing, and a civics test that gets into an understanding of history and the US governmental system. So due to a medical disability, there are many potential applicants who would make great US citizens, who would otherwise qualify, but have this issue to overcome. And there is a solution to this. There is a legal mechanism, a form, and a process that USCIS allows for those who have a medical disability and need an exception, not just an accommodation, an exception to those tests. The form that's required to be filed is called N, as in Nancy, N648, and it must be accompanied with a letter and a diagnosis from a medical doctor or other qualified professional. So this exception would then take away the requirement that you otherwise have to meet. And again, it's not an accommodation for someone who could take the test and just need some additional help due to a specific disability. So the minimum legal standard that someone has to meet to show that they qualify for this exception is a preponderance of the evidence. So the USCIS officer looking at this request for an exception is going to be looking at the preponderance of the evidence. More likely than not, more than 50% likely that you deserve this exception. So you have to prove through evidence that is ideally submitted when you apply for naturalization in the beginning with your N400 form. You're also going to want to submit the N648 form with the required supporting evidence. So the N400 does allow on its own, and you should make sure this exception is the right way for you, because in the N400 form, it does allow for reasonable accommodations for someone with perhaps a sight issue or a hearing issue or a speaking issue, a disability in that way that could be solved with a reasonable accommodation, that you still take the test, you just take it in a slightly different manner. And so your disability is accommodated. In contrast, the N648 is a request that due to this disability that's lasted more than a year or is likely to last more than a year, you cannot take the test. You are unable to benefit from any reasonable accommodations because of the severity of your medical condition. The USCIS requires, U.S. Citizenship Immigration Services requires that only certain medical professionals can certify the disability form. And those are medical doctors, of course, doctors who are osteopathic physicians, and clinical psychologists. So you're able to get certification for your form N648 from one of them. So make sure that the person filling out that form is qualified to do so. The form is complex, and there are a number of complex requirements too. It's an extensive process. So make sure that the doctor filling this out for you has done it before and knows what to look for and what to provide. So here are some of the key elements, not an exhaustive list, but some key elements that your doctor has to include. The N648 has to show that your disability has lasted at least 12 months or will last that long. So it can't be a short-term issue. The diagnosis that the doctor will provide has to be detailed, and it has to be an actual diagnosis. It has to show that you are indeed suffering from this condition, you're dealing with it, you have it and the date it began and when they predict it will end, if ever. So again, the person completing this has to be a qualified professional in those three categories. And when you file this N648, it has to be done no more than 6 months before you apply to naturalize. So your N648 can actually expire if it's done 6 months in advance of applying. So don't get it done too early. Make sure you're eligible to naturalize at a specific date. So you have the N648 ready to go a few weeks or a few months, not more than 6 months before you apply. Let us know if you have any questions about the N648 form, the medical disability exception, and definitely take care.